Hello, I'm Ryan McCabe, and today I'm joined by MP Luke Pollard. And today we're going to be talking about police misconduct. How are you doing, Luke?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. So, Luke, would you say that currently police misconduct is a large issue within the United Kingdom?
I think there's always challenges in policing, and I think the difficulties that we've got at the moment is that there are examples, I think, where police behaviour have fallen below standards that we expect, and that especially for certain communities, that the experience they have of policing is not as good as we need it to be. And sadly, in some police forces, there have been a series of behaviours and actions that fall well below what is expected of decent policing and decent policing standards. And because in the UK, the police by consent, they need to have the support of communities to do so, that there's still work to be done, I think, for to get every force up to the standards that I think the public rightly expect of them.
So you said there is work to be done. Do you think there is a timescale to this, or do you think it will eventually just happen by itself?
Well, I think change, you should never assume that change is inevitable. Change happens when you have people who make that change, who drive it. And so to improve police culture, you need to have leaders within police forces. You need to have police and crime commissioners, well, I'm not a huge fan of those. And you need to have politicians that sit outside demanding more, scrutinising work, making sure that high standards are enforced and properly trained. So it builds a culture of professionalism and high standards for every community. Now, this week in the House of Commons, I've been asking questions around the murder of 4 young gay men in London, where the Met Police didn't investigate them, which was a blatant example of homophobic policing, and that needs to be rooted out of all our policing, just as racist policing and misogyny needs to be rooted out of our policing as well. That can only really happen when policing is properly funded as well. So, you know, the police are not without their own pressures on them to do it, but there is no excuse for misconduct, and no excuse, I think, for actions of the police that delve into and go into, you know, misogyny, hate crimes, homophobia, and other abuse of minority groups in particular.
Yeah, you said you obviously the Met Police, they were to blame for discriminatory behaviour. So do you think that, well, others have suggested this too, but do you think that it's an issue that needs to be sorted region by region rather than focusing on a national kind of movement together?
Yeah, because the way policing is structured in England in particular, you do have a large number of forces with different cultures, different leadership styles that will require a kind of a geography by geography approach. But what you can do, I think, is set the expectations on a national level. So clearly, you will police Devon and Cornwall in a different way than you will police central London. However, people in both those parts of the world should have the same high expectations, that they'll be treated with respect, with fairness and with dignity by the police. And whether that is a Devon and Cornwall police officer or whether that is someone from the City of London or the Met Police, they should have that same expectation. But how you do it, how you deploy that, how you change that culture will, of course, be different depending on where you are. But I think you need to have that same high standard and the aspiration of hitting those high standards everywhere.
As the MP for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport, how would you describe your relationship with the Devon and Cornwall Police?
Oh, I think I've got a good relationship with the police locally. I mean, Devon and Cornwall Police are full of, by and large, good, decent, hardworking people that are really trying their best to police what is, you know, a huge geography with far fewer officers than they really need to do so. I mean, over the last 10 years, they've lost over 500 police officers in cuts. We'll get an extra 130 back in the government's latest police recruitment drive, but that still means we'll be way below what we had in 2010. Now, that has consequences in both response times, in terms of what they can investigate, and differences between the experience in, say, a big city like Plymouth and rural areas where that has seen a real change in the visibility of police and their response times and their ability to follow through on what sadly is a situation where we're seeing rising urban and faster rising rural crime. So, we do need to, my job, I think, is to back the police to get the resources they need, but also where there are things that aren't right, is to call them out. And sometimes that is in private conversations and sometimes that's publicly. But as a member of parliament, I think you have a responsibility to the people who elect you to demand high standards from every public service that's available, including the police.
So you said you're a firm believer in funding. So would you say that the police are currently being let down by the government in terms of funding, resources, and just training in general?
Yes, the police are underfunded. We've seen 21,000 police officers cut in austerity since 2010. That's an enormous number of officers that otherwise would be on the beat, keeping our community safe, that were cut in the name of ideology. And those cuts were not inevitable. They were a choice that the government made, and I think they made the wrong choice. Now, replacing some of them is a good thing, and that's very welcome. But when you replace an experienced officer with a brand new officer, often on poor terms and conditions, by the way, then you do get a difference in output from those two individuals. Now, I'm a big supporter of our police in the region, and I want to see them get a fairer allocation of resources, because the Southwest is poorly resourced anyway, because we are by and large resourced based on our permanent population, rather than the population that swells, especially in summer months, with the amount of tourists that we get as a region. So we are underfunded for the actual crime and policing situation that we have as a region. So that puts even more pressure on our officers, PCSOs and police staff to actually deliver what they need to be. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be demanding high standards of them still, but it does mean we need to recognise those pressures. And for folks like myself, we need to be campaigning to get better funding for our police.
Thanks for that. Following the shooting that happened in September, in October, it came out that 2 people have been charged for gross misconduct within the Devon and Cornwall police force. Do you believe that the police force then reacted positively after, receiving this news and receiving the verdict that it came to?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for me to comment on ongoing disciplinary investigations, but the shooting in Keyham was a horrendous tragedy, and it's important to make clear that the response on the day was outstanding. Response time of 6 minutes to a mass shooting is exceptional anywhere in the country. But what we need to understand, and as a community we need answers to, is how did this happen and why did this happen? And the concern that lots of people have is, why did someone have their firearm taken from them and then given back? And so it's right that the Independent Office of Police Conduct are conducting their investigation. I've met with them. I've organised meetings with the community, so community leaders can understand what they're doing. We need to give them space to do their proper investigation. But we, as a force, Devon and Cornwall Police have been raising concerns about the lack of resourcing for firearms for frankly, for 8-9 years. And so they know that there's a problem in this system. And, of course, everyone needs to have done their job properly, and we'll need to wait the investigation to find out, what has actually happened here. But my concern as a member of parliament is not only making sure that we get to the root of how this happened, but is to ensure it doesn't happen again. And that does mean, I think, a top to bottom review of firearms laws, in particular, looking at the examples of the use of pump action shotguns, which is the weapon that was used in Keyham, to make sure that we are looking about, is it right that a pump action shotgun can be kept in a home? And I think these are the questions and the challenges that I will be making to ministers, to get them to set out, if they do think that is the case, why. It's not my view, I have to say. And as someone who was supporting the community in the aftermath of the shooting, there are some very strong views on gun law that we need, but also a lot of support for our police officers and how they responded to it, and also how they're supporting the community on an ongoing basis. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a thorough investigation, and it looks like Devon and Cornwall Police are cooperating fully and being transparent with that police watchdog investigation, which is good to see. We need to get some answers there, but then we need to make sure that this can never, ever happen again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I imagine the people of Plymouth have the full support of the police. But where do you think the trust is at the minute in terms of, do you think the people of Plymouth, rightfully so, put their trust into the police, given the fact that weeks before they reissued the shotgun license to the shooter?
Yeah, I think by and large, the police and the city of Plymouth have a good relationship. We know there's fewer officers than there need to be. We know that response times and investigations are sometimes difficult in there, and we know that there are areas where I'd like to see additional focus. Violence against women and girls being one of those, drink spiking, especially for our student populations of the city, being another. But by and large, I think the relationship is good, but a relationship can be better when there's a different structure. So what we've seen after Keam, thanks to a cross-party and cross-Plymouth effort that I've been leading to make sure we get the resources, is proper neighbourhood policing reinstated in Keam. This is the policing model that we had until the cut started in 2010, where you have officers allocated to a community on the ground, getting to know the individuals, the communities, the bodies that are active there, getting to know the families, getting to know the little tearaways that they can point on the right direction, proper neighbourhood policing. And we're seeing that in Keam at the moment. And that is to the police's credit that they have understood the need, the policing need that is there for what is an incredibly traumatized community, and are taking really good steps to have officers that love their community, want to see it safe, and will do so not with the big clunking fist of the law, but with the encouragement and the care that comes from proper neighbourhood policing and community relations. But there's still big challenges to come. And one of the concerns that I do have is, because the killer took his own life, there is not a moment of justice as there would be if he had been arrested and put on trial. In that situation, you would see the evidence presented to a jury, you would have seen a conviction, and you would have seen a sentencing. So there would have been moments for the community and the victims and their families to see justice being done. Now, without that, the only justice that we can see being done is improvements in police processes. Now, we need to understand that however the police processes failed, or whether they did fail or not, to get to the bottom of that, it was the killer who went out of his house with a shotgun, a pump-action shotgun, and killed those people. And so we do need to make sure that within this, that there is a proper understanding of what has happened, why this happened, how this happened, and then the community can really start healing when we move into we're going to make sure that no community, not in our city, our region, or our country, will ever go through what we have done this year. And that, I think, is how we create a positive legacy from what has been just an unspeakable tragedy in our city. Yeah,
I couldn't put that better myself. Thank you for your time today, Luke. You've been very helpful in answering my questions. Yeah, that's all.
Great, thank you very much.